image stabilization. Lots of digital SLRs do too, but the amazing thing is that image stabilization is going further and further down the range, and even the most basic sort of point and shoots now come with it. The thing is, though, on these cheaper cameras, is it any good? We bought both these two for under 100 quid each.
Yep. The purpose of image stabilization is to get rid of the blur that you get from a shaking camera. So a camera that's not on a tripod, or a camera you're using for action, like on your mountain bike or sticking out of a car, or here in the blustery countryside.
It's not that blustery, though, is it?
No, it's not, is it?
No.
But don't worry, because I know a place that is. That's blustery.
This is the Air Kicks vertical wind tunnel. It's where skydivers hone their skills in winds of up to 170 miles an hour, generated by enormous vanes turning below it.
Have you ever been in winds as strong as this? I mean, this is 120 miles an hour.
It's incredible. Obviously, I've stuck my head out of the car, but it's not like this. I mean, you can feel the pressure.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything is going to test the image stabilization capabilities of these two cameras, it's this. I mean, this is taking wind and buffeting and all that to the extreme.
Our challenge was to find out which of our cameras would take the steadiest picture of our still-life potted plant in an extremely unsteady environment.
Right, mate, here we go. All right.
I got the new Kodak C913 and was putting my money on the digital image stabilization system it uses. Digital IS reduces the blurriness of pictures by adjusting the camera's sensitivity to light so that it can keep the shutter speed as fast as possible and therefore give you less time for the camera to move and blur the picture.
Whereas I reckon the optical image stabilization on the Panasonic LS80 was the way to go. This is based inside the camera lens itself and reduces blur by detecting movement using a processor and minutely shifting the path of the image to the sensor.
I went in first with the image stabilization on my Kodak switched off because we wanted to see just how shaky the wind tunnel would make our shots. The noise and speed inside the tunnel were amazing. It was so windy, my Kodak would have flown off had it not been strapped to my wrist. It was practically impossible to aim it in the right direction, let alone take a steady shot of our not-so-still life. As these pictures show, with image stabilization turned off, my Kodak just couldn't cope with these extreme conditions.
So, how would my Panasonic fare with its image stabilization turned off? Every minute in here, 34 billion cubic centimetres of air was rushing past me, and that made for predictably fuzzy-looking pictures. Very abstract.
So it was clear, without IS, we couldn't get any usable shots at all. It was time to see just how good the technology in our entry-level cameras was.
So we turned our stabilization on and readied ourselves for another buffeting to give our camera's image stabilization the hardest possible test.
Because the Kodak has digital image stabilization using a faster shutter speed, it should reduce blur from my shaky camera work, as well as from the movement of the leaves. It should also allow me to up the light sensitivity by using the one-touch button for steady shots. This is something you can do manually in most cameras, but it was much more handy in my point-and-click Kodak.
Next, it was my turn to see how well my entry-level Panasonic would perform. Its optical image stabilization system is what the purists generally go for, as it uses dedicated gyro sensors to detect movement. But how well could it steady my shakiness? And were our stabilized shots any better? It was time to escape the wind tunnel and find out. Oh, what a splendid invention. Let's see what the image stabilization's like. Well, it was better, but not by much. Sadly, my Panasonic hadn't performed as well as I'd hoped.
I felt like I was all over the place with my motion. And look at that, that's not a bad shot there.
You could see a real improvement from my Kodak's unstabilized images. I was impressed.
Fantastic.
But to establish just how good our pictures really were, we got professional skydiver Simon to take photos of the potted plant. The difference was that he was using a much more expensive Olympus E3 digital SLR camera with image stabilization. So, how would our photos compare to the real deal? And here's all three results.
Yeah.
The SLR, the professional grade camera, is clearly way ahead of
Yeah,
our
this is
two.
our control picture, if you like, and you can really see the high-end technology stabilising the picture there.
Yeah, and you can boost the sensitivity, boost the shutter speed, and still end up with a great picture.
Absolutely.
I mean, my Panasonic, I was really a bit disappointed, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, the optical image stabilisation, it just couldn't quite freeze the image, and also it couldn't freeze the image of the plant because the shutter speed's still slow.
It's the thing, it's just a smooth image, it's just not in focus, and, you know, it's obviously being affected by the movement.
Blurred.
Whereas my image certainly isn't smooth, it's very grainy, but it's absolutely pin-sharp.
It's pin-sharp, but the cost of that sort of cheap and cheerful way of just getting a stable image by boosting the sensitivity means you end up with a horrible amount of noise in the picture.
You absolutely do, but to be fair to Kodak, they don't call it image stabilisation, they call it blur reduction, and that's exactly what it's done, it's reduced the blur.
Just a button press.
Yeah, and so I think just fractionally, the winner of this second stage of this week's challenge is Kodak's C913 compact digital camera.